Today we celebrate the life of a good man, beloved by all, remembered by many. He touched the lives of thousands through his charity work and is going to be dearly missed. Brother, son, friend. Suddenly, there came a loud crash, and the doors of the church fell through. Onto the ground, in a puff of splintered wood and dust, was my boss. My God, what on earth is going on here? I'm looking for my employee, JJ. Mr. Michaels, please, this is my brother's funeral. This is exceptionally unprofessional. You want to talk to me about being unprofessional? I'll have your job, you clout. I'll blacklist you from every company out there. You'll never live to touch another computer for as long as I live. My boss was acting deranged. I had no idea what to do about it. But my mother and father looked furious. How dare you crash a funeral and threaten my son's job? Get out of here before I throw you out. You dare not talk to me like that. I will ruin this funeral. My boss made a beeline for my brother's casket and was about to throw it to the ground. I guess he wasn't used to taking orders, so he was furious that my dad had spoken to him that way. But what my boss didn't know was that my dad was an ex-Marine, a man who wasn't used to losing fights. Within seconds, my boss was laid flat on his back, fully unconscious. The funeral went on, even as my boss was passed out on the floor. My name's JJ. I work for a small tech company and have been here for 6 years. I was friends with everyone who worked here. Our former boss, Mrs. Adeline, retired, and Mikhail took her place. From the day Michael arrived, I knew he was a bully. He would scold anyone who was even a minute late and slash the salaries of those who made the slightest mistake. I remember one time he even forced an intern to wash his car because she arrived 30 minutes late. My boss hated me in particular. We worked in cubicles, while he had a giant office at the end of the hall with a floor-to-ceiling window that allowed him to watch us. There was no mistaking it. Every day, without fail, my boss would watch me enter the building and stare me down for the first 5 minutes of the day.
What is his problem?
Same as every day, I guess. He just hates me. Janet shrugged and sat back down, but I could tell she was unnerved. She was new to the company and had only been coming into the office for the last week. She was so busy getting the lay of the land last week that she missed his behavior. Just as I was getting into the data tracking and analysis work that I do, I got a text that read, "You need to answer this call," and then my phone started ringing. It was my mom. She never calls at work, so something must have happened. Something serious. I pick up the phone.
JJ, honey, I'm so sorry to have to call and give you this bad news, but TJ was in a car crash on his way to work this morning. He didn't make it.
My world suddenly folded in on itself. I couldn't feel my body anymore, but I experienced the ugliest sensation of falling. I didn't know how far I had to reach the bottom of this pit, but suddenly my mother's voice was disappearing and it was replaced by my boss's. I blinked away the haze of grief and saw my boss leaning over me, shouting so loud there was spittle flying everywhere. How dare you take a personal call on work time? What do you think we're paying you for? You've always been a lazy worker, JJ. I'll have you fired for this. I stared at him as he continued to scream, but I didn't understand what he was saying. I was completely lost. TJ is my twin brother. We have done everything together since we were born. We learned to ride bikes together. We learned to read together. I carried him home when he broke his leg falling out of a tree. He carried me home when I broke my leg skateboarding at the park. We were lucky because we never got bored of each other. We went to university apart from one another, but we visited often and talked weekly, no matter what. I can't get my head around the idea that he's gone. You're going to be working through your lunch break to make it up to me. I cannot believe how belligerent.
Excuse me, Mr. Michaels, but actually, you can't make anyone work through their lunch break. And can't you see that JJ is in shock? I imagine he's just gotten some terrible news, and you're being very insensitive.
Listen, girl, don't presume to tell me how to do my job. I know what I'm doing. He's already tried to get out of work this week by asking for annual leave.
Isn't that something we're entitled to? In my contract?
Yes, you are. But he didn't submit the papers correctly. He misspelled one of the words. He handed it in 5 weeks in advance, instead of the 4 stated in company policy. He's always trying to skirt around his work.
That doesn't seem right. He worked so hard last week to help me get used to my job.
I ignored the conversations going on around me. I was frozen in time. My brother, my best friend, gone. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and made to leave, but my boss grabbed my arm in a bruising grip, and I was suddenly still. My brother has died. I have to go home. I need to be with my family.
Liar. You're lazy and entitled. You can't just make up fake siblings to kill off to get out of work.
I'm not making anything up. Now, if you please, my brother is dead, and I need to be with my family.
If you leave this building before it is time for you to clock out, then you can bet you'll be fired on the spot.
The boss pushed me back into my chair, and I stared up at him helplessly. He had his hands on his hips and was smirking, like he'd just won a fight. I wanted to cry, but I set my shoulders straight and nodded. Fine, I will stay and do your work, but I will be filing a complaint. This is inhumane.
I don't know who you think you are, but your complaints go to me, and I'll handle them as I see fit.
I couldn't argue because my brain was scattered. I worked for the rest of the day. My coworkers came up to me at random intervals.
JJ, man, I'm so sorry to hear about TJ.
Thank you, Tim.
I heard about your brother. May he rest in peace.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. My boss, however, piled on more and more work. As the day went by, I began drowning under how much work he was setting me. The sun went down, and I wasn't halfway through what he wanted me to do.
Finish this by the end of the week, or you'll lose your job.
The pile was bigger than me. I had no idea why he expected all of this from me. Did he really think I could do all this? Plan a funeral and grieve at the same time? How was I supposed to do that? My mother called me on the way home that evening and asked me when I could come home. Mom, I'm sorry. I can't get the flight over until the actual funeral. My work, my boss is being, I don't know. I can't leave my work right now. They need me.
Honey, we need you too.
I know. I promise I'll be there for the funeral. I promise. No matter what. The next day, I went in and powered on. I didn't have lunch. I didn't even breathe, really. I just made my way through the pile as fast as I could. Soon, the pile was going down faster than it was going up, despite my boss's best efforts. On the Thursday, I walked into my boss's office, shoulders back and head high. I wasn't going to be shy about this. I had to go to my brother's funeral, otherwise I'd never be able to live with myself. Sir, tomorrow I won't be at work. I will be attending my twin brother's funeral.
Not possible. We need you tomorrow.
Not as much as my family needs me. Not as much as I need to say goodbye to my brother. I felt powerful and sick at the same time. I loved my job, and I knew that I had just sacrificed it. But at the end of the day, there was no real sacrifice. I had nothing I needed more than to give my brother the farewell he deserved. And if that meant never going back to my job, then so be it. I flew to the city where my family is based and met my parents off the plane. They gave me a hug, and I cried on their shoulders as though I were a child. I miss him so much. I miss him like I've never missed anything before in my life. Why did this have to happen?
I know, son. It's not fair.
It took us a long time to get ourselves together, and when I turned my phone back on in the back of the car, I was suddenly flooded with missed calls, emails, texts, and notifications from the work social chat. Most of it was from my boss. Threats that I was going to be fired, that he'd sue me for being so unprofessional, that he was going to make sure I regretted this. The other messages were from concerned coworkers. Apparently, my boss has signed me up for an important meeting with the heads of the parent company. I had been sent an agenda and a series of talking points so that I could best represent my company. Only my boss never warned me about this. When the phone rang again, I answered.
Where the hell are you?
I'm in my home state. I told you I would be. I have a funeral to attend.
You're lying. You just want me to look bad.
Please calm down, Mr. Michaels. There's no ulterior motive here. I just have a personal event. I never agreed to attend this meeting. That's a problem you're going to have to solve on your own, sir. He continued to scream down the phone, but I hung up. I put my phone on silent and let my head drop against the headrest. That night, I stayed awake in my old bed, TJ's empty bunk above mine silent, when it used to creak with the weight of him turning over. I couldn't see the wall light up with the telltale signs that he was still awake, or hear him muttering in his sleep. It's been years since we shared a room, but being back in my childhood home highlighted the absolute absence of him, and my throat burned. I missed my brother. The next morning, my mom loaded me up with pancakes and coffee. I was tired and not at all hungry. No one bugged me to try to eat. By the time the sun was up, the house was full. My aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, old friends, school teachers. It seemed like everyone was here to say goodbye. At midday, we formed a somber procession and made our way to the town church. We marched down the winding road and arrived at the church with its flaking yellow paint and haunting music.
Today we celebrate the life of a good man, beloved by all, remembered by many. He touched the lives of thousands through his charity work and is going to be dearly missed. Brother, son, friend.
Suddenly, there came a loud crash, and the doors of the church fell through. Onto the ground, in a puff of splintered wood and dust, was my boss.
My God, what on earth is going on here? I'm looking for my employee, JJ.
Mr. Michaels, please, this is my brother's funeral. This is exceptionally unprofessional.
You want to talk to me about being unprofessional? I'll have your job, you clout. I'll blacklist you from every company out there. You'll never live to touch another computer for as long as I live.
My boss was acting deranged. I had no idea what to do about it. But my mother and father looked furious.
How dare you crash a funeral and threaten my son's job? Get out of here before I throw you out. You dare not talk to me like that. I will ruin this funeral.
My boss made a beeline for my brother's casket and was about to throw it to the ground. I guess he wasn't used to taking orders, so he was furious that my dad had spoken to him that way. But what my boss didn't know was that my dad was an ex-Marine, a man who wasn't used to losing fights. Within seconds, my boss was laid flat on his back, fully unconscious. The funeral went on, even as my boss was passed out on the floor. Later, the chief of police, who was in attendance, woke my boss up and arrested him. I went home the following Sunday and went into work the next day to pack up my things. I don't know what happened to my boss, but I knew I wouldn't have a job if he had any say in it. To my surprise, my whole crew were standing in the lobby, and they cheered as I came through the door.
JJ, welcome back. I am Mrs. Paula from the head of the company. The CEO sent me down to assess how the company was going. From day one, you were there to help me. You are the one that holds this company up. I knew when I met you that we were going to promote you. We just never expected how easy it would be to open up that position.
But what about Mr. Michaels?
Don't you worry about him.
I got to work right away. The company flourished under my hand because I knew we worked better as a family than as a dictatorship. I was still grieving my brother, but in a way, I felt like he was the one to bring this opportunity to me. He always did say to look for the silver linings, because there always were some. It wasn't until a month later that I saw my old boss again. He was cleaning the windows of my office. He didn't say a single thing to me, but for the first time since I started working there, he didn't hurl some kind of insult at me. From the rumors I heard, the CEO gave my boss two options: either work as a janitor for 5 months or face a lawsuit. My boss chose to work as a janitor, forced to take orders from the very employees he once bullied. I often made sure to mess up my toilet and requested that he clean it twice a day. His wife left him after hearing how her husband ruined a funeral and embarrassed himself. Thanks for watching.